Awesome, great. Welcome back to week 7 of Decode. And today's topic is gonna be team building and company culture. And please just type in the chat or let me know if you guys can't really hear me. All right. So as usual, I will go over logistics and then time for the speaker and then a quick Q&A session at the end. Again, please turn on your camera if possible. And the assignments and project assignments are due this Sunday. And then, as usual, I will give you guys the quiz code at the end of my part. And I also email decodesv@gmail for any questions. All right, starting. So let's define what is culture. Basically, when done right, it's the thing that holds the employees accountable and tells them how to behave when there's no explicit instructions. And with that, here's a quote from Brian Chesky. Simply put, the stronger the culture, the less corporate process a company needs. When the culture is strong, you can trust everyone to do the right thing. So it's basically the sense of trust within the company. And why is culture important? Just look at the stats. 65% of the startups failed because the two or three co-founders got into argument and never figured it out. And then in comparison, the US divorce rates is only 40 to 50%. So that shows you how important culture is and how important is to align your visions within the company. So here are a few examples from the bigger firms. The first one is Netflix. They have this thing called Keeper Test. I think it's a really good way for managers to evaluate whether they should keep or fire one employees. I'll just read it. Which of my people, if they told me they were leaving for a similar job at a peer company, would I fight hard to keep at Netflix? I just think that's a really cool mentality within the firm. Second example would be Google. Google is, known for its snacks bar and then, game rooms and, puppies and stuff. And the reason for that is that Google strives the people that Google is looking for are creative innovators, and for people to be creative, you gotta be in a relaxed environment, right? So they don't really enforce any strict rules within the company. So that's another type of culture. And in Alibaba's case, their HR department has this veto power, meaning that regardless how strong the applicant is, the HR department will have the final say to whether this applicant fit into the culture or not. And with that, they have 100% of the power to reject an applicant, even if they're, the best programmer in the world. So with that, here is a checklist of for you to cultivate this culture. Number one is to be proud of what you're doing. If you're not even proud of the problem you're solving, you might be better off just to work for Google or some bigger companies, because you got to be proud of what you're doing. Number two is to convince others with your vision. And when we talk about visions, think about Elon Musk. When he says conquer Mars, like it's almost impossible and it's super challenging. But when he says that, you feel like, oh wow, you feel empowered to join his journey to actually conquer Mars. Number three is to come up with a set of core values and be the model within the company. You can be, be creative, be nice, or something like that. But you gotta come up with a list of core values and be specific as specific as possible, and really represent the company yourself, represent the cultures yourself. And number four, once you come up with this list, you might want to check to see if at least some of the core values are focused on the customers. So take Facebook as an example. They have this saying of move fast and break things. This is more of an internal, like it is inwardly. Um, this, I guess this saying is focused on internal stuff. So let's say if you're an engineer and when you encounter a problem, you think about move fast and break things, right? And that way, and with that, we might not be just, if you think about it from that perspective, you might not be surprised when you hear about the antitrust issues and stuff with Facebook, because they are cultivating this culture of getting the goal of without really considering what effect it might have on other people. And on the other hand, take Google. I'm not comparing both companies. They obviously have their own issues, but from a culture's perspective, Google has this saying of "Don't be evil." And think about it, when as part of Google, when you encounter a problem, you will think about "Don't be evil" and really take others' feelings into consideration. So that's just a comparison of two kinds of culture. And number five, moving on the list, you really need to think about what diversity means to you. And this can be gender, race, or diversity of thoughts. Because initially, when you're an early stage startup, you hire your friends, you hire your friends' friends, and after a while, you will get a monoculture type of environment. And as a startup, you don't really want that, because the more diverse you are, the more creative you are in terms of solving problems and stuff. Moving on the list, number six, you want to have a hiring process in place as early as possible to make sure that you have this process to hire the right people as early as possible. And this hiring process, it's work in progress, right? You can keep iterating it over time, but you got to make sure that you have this standard of whether one should be hired or not. So that's at the end of my part, and the Chris code for this week is Go Bears, without space, no uppercase. And without further ado, I'll welcome our speaker of tonight. Sorry for the pronunciation again. I'll try. Jair Vercosa. And he's the CTO.
That was good.
Thanks. CTO and co-founder at Flieber, and the founder at Carta Brazil. Let's welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me here, and it's a pleasure. I was telling Thomas that I didn't prepare a actual presentation. It's more like talking about my experiences and the things that drove me during all those years. So just a quick explanation of what Flieber is and what Carta is. If you are in the Silicon Valley, you probably heard about Carta, or if you have ever done some kind of like internship in one of those startups, you have heard about Carta. Carta is a company that help a lot of all the startups in the Silicon Valley to manage their cap table, which is basically like when they receive investments, they have to manage the stakeholders, how much ownership they have given to employees, and these kind of things. That's what Carta does. While Flieber is more focused on the online retailing industry. So what we do at Flieber, we are disrupting the supply chain industry for online retailing, connecting sales and inventory, and expediting this process of getting goods at the right place. So what I prepared here is basically like some simple principles that I've gone through my career and I've learned along the way. I want to start with culture, and I really like Thomas your slides. You did a really good job at it, and like collecting and gathering a lot of those informations. Um, when I say I am founder of Carta Brazil, when I joined Carta, Carta had around like 38 employees. I was actually the employee 38, so 37. Um, and I was in Brazil. I'm Brazilian, and I was living there, and I was actually running a small consulting business when the CEO actually called me and then said that he wanted to open a company in Brazil. Um, his reason was interesting, and that actually was the first contact of the Silicon Valley and the culture in the Silicon Valley. He wanted to bring a lot more diversity. So to your point, Thomas, that makes a lot of sense. He wanted to bring more diversity, hiring engineers from another country. He also wanted to hire them faster than he had hired in the United States, just because it's a very competitive market. But the problem becomes, how do you roll out your culture that you are creating here in one particular country onto another country with a totally different culture, with some things that are local to that people? How do you do that? And those are some of the principles that I've learned along the way that actually are really interesting, and I apply that to Flieber today. I think the first thing that Carta did really well, and we are doing the same thing at Flieber, is like you said, Thomas, defining really good core values. But what I want to tell here is what a core value means, right? Like I think a lot of people think about, oh, be honest as a core value, or like simple things that are on your life as a human being, right? Like be honest is obviously something that you should do anyways. Um, so I want to define core values as slightly different. Um, Core values actually means things that help your team or employees to take better decisions. So when you think about this, be honest is not a really good value, just because it doesn't help you to take a decision in regards to your work, right? Like if you are not being honest, like you're not really like doing really good for your company. But when you think about, how do I make a decision whether tackle a project with a shortcut or tackle a project with like the right solution, right? So there are companies that have on their core values things like don't take shortcuts at all, so that means for engineering team that they would actually do the things right at the first time and spend more time building that thing rather than just like taking shortcuts and breaking things like Facebook does. And that's actually another good thing, another good example from Thomas. Facebook says break things fast, right? Like move fast and break things. And that's actually a really good core value because it helps you to take a decision. Like if you are going to build something and you don't know if that's something that's going to work, or if that's going to break something that is currently working, like you can use that core value and then say, you know what, let's build it, let's make it happen, because that's part of our nature as a company. Another really good core value that I really liked from Carta is progress, not activity. And that's really good for tech leads, managers to think about what they're doing, right? So when you look back at your backlog or all the things that your team have done in the last 2 weeks or month, if you are seeing things like a lot of things but not much progress, you're probably having a lot of activity and not really good progress. And when you're not having progress, like results basically are the main driver for culture. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But if you're not getting any progress there, most likely the morale of your team is going to go down. The culture is going to be really poor. and people will start to blame each other, right? So making sure that you're always making progress rather than like doing a lot of things, it's actually really important. And the last one that I really like also from Carter is do things that don't scale, right? For engineering is really good because often you'll get engineers thinking about like, oh, like this has to be really scalable. We're gonna have 1 million requests. Are you gonna have that really like per second? Are you sure about this? Most likely not in the first month or the first week, right? So doing things that don't scale first, make sure that you will always optimize for having something that actually adds value instead of having something that is super scalable at upfront, but it might be the wrong thing. So you just spend a lot of time actually doing something that's it's on the wrong direction. Oh, by the way, feel free to to ask any question. You can interrupt me at any time. I don't care. So if you want to know anything about like what I'm telling you, please just interrupt me. Cool. So that is the first thing, right? Like define your core values, but define core values that actually help people to make decisions. The second thing that also is something that we are following at Flieber, Carta also does that really well. And the most stunning companies that also do that really well. Amazon is a good example, which is put your customer or put your clients first, right? What that means basically is like everything that you do, literally everything you do in the company is to serve a particular client, whether this is a company or another company, or whether this is like a end consumer. At the end of the day, you will serve somebody, right? Even if you're serving a company, there's a person behind that brand that you are serving and helping with, right? So putting your customer at first is actually putting human beings first, right? Like how they interact with your product, how they use your product, how they interact with your people. And one of the things that we are really proud of, I am particularly really proud of what we've created at Carta, is the customer success team that lives in Brazil now. That team is remarkable, and a lot of people actually reach out to us like sending compliments for how helpful they are, how willing to push things further they are, how they are willing to help with every single thing, even if it's not their job. And there's a really good example of, I forgot actually where's the company, but the CEO of that company called their customer success and asked for a pizza, but they actually sell shoes. So they called asking for a pizza, and the person that was on the other end of the line said, "Oh, so sir, like we don't sell pizzas, but I have here like a catalog of pizza restaurants around you. What's your address? Maybe I can help you. Do you want me to order pizza for you?" Like, and then that's kind of the level of the power that a core value like this can have, right? Like, and that actually makes all the difference. Think about all the companies that you love and all the companies that you had a really good relationship or experience with. All of them put clients at first, and that is the type of culture that actually drives everything inside of those companies. And that's the same thing for Carta, is the same thing for Flieber. Everything we do, we always think with the customer in the first place. Thirdly, promote leadership by example. And I think, Thomas, you mentioned that as well on your presentation. But there are basically, 7 principles. I don't know if I'm going to remember all of them here, but 7 principles of leadership that actually makes all the difference when you are trying to build a culture. So things like be on time all the time as a manager, right? Like that's going to drive your team to always do things on time. Hold yourself accountable when you are committed to something. and you don't deliver that, hold yourself accountable. That's going to put your team as well into a position that they will hold themselves accountable because you are the example, right? The other thing is make sure that you celebrate, the accomplishments of your team, and therefore your team will also enjoy the moments that are really good, right? The moments that they can ship a new product, the moments that they can have some kind of reward coming from leadership or something like that. So when you do those type of things, you are creating a type of environment that actually enjoy what they're doing, right? And I don't know if I'm gonna remember all the leadership principles, but I can bring later here if you guys ask. I actually have around here. Um, all right, so promote leadership by example, right? Like make sure that your leadership team and yourself as a leader, if you desire to be so, are doing things always like thinking that you are the example. What you do, your team will repeat. Um, this is one thing that I really like about this, cultures that have this, for me, they are the best in terms of innovation, which is curiosity, fostering curiosity. Um, I've seen, a lot of really good amount of engineers. They are really good building things, but they are not very good at like figuring out new ways of doing the same thing more efficiently or with a better performance or things like that. They just like get things done and move on. Curiosity is also the thing that will drive the creativity of your company, right? So if you foster the curiosity, what we have in your culture is that people assembling small groups together in order to get something done, or in order to figure it out, to research about something, and then figure out a better way of doing things. Um, having this sense of asking the whys behind something is actually the most important thing for innovative companies. And I can give you some examples of how I particularly like to apply that when I'm hiring. um, the thing that I ask usually the most to candidates is the whys behind each movement that they make in their resume, right? So if they move from company A to company B, why? What was the thing that you were looking for? Which kind of learnings were you looking for? And that's a good example for you whenever you are in an interview. Think about that, right? Like if you're moving from one company to another, what are you looking for? Are you just moving that because of, excuse me, the better money that you're getting there, or are you moving because of the mission of that company, or are you moving just because you had a really bad manager and you don't like them? So if you move from one place to the other and you have the sense of curiosity, you probably have a really good why behind your movements, and that's what I look for when I am when I'm interviewing people. um, After that, the other thing that I really appreciate is when you have a company that has open communication. Google is a really good example of that. At Google, you will never be able to talk, bad things about your colleague to your manager without receiving a reply email with that colleague, CC'd on that email, and then like for you both to figure it out. And I think that is a really interesting environment because ultimately you guys are a team, right? Like you are working together towards a goal. And if you don't like each other, if there's something, you gotta resolve between you, the two of you, right? Like you need to have some time to discuss. And this type of culture helps a lot with like this type of talk that happens behind your back, right? Like people talking bad things about you. When you have this type of principle in your culture, that thing never happens, right? And that is really, really good, because like the most of the toxic companies or the toxic cultures have this kind of behaviors. People talking against, like, bad things about each other on the corridors, aisles of the company, like through emails that only like few people are on the thread. Like that is how things happen. And suddenly you just find yourself in a place where you can trust anyone. And trust, like Thomas said, it's one of the most important assets you can have in a team. So, like, just a quick recap: make sure that you have really good values, and make sure that those values are always helping people to make decisions. Put clients first, and that will just create a company that is obsessed with making clients number one. Promote leadership by example. So make sure that your leaders and managers are also following whatever values you have defined for your company. Foster curiosity, right? Like make sure that you hire people that are always constantly asking the whys. Adopt open communication, like avoid back talking on your back. Like make sure that whenever somebody talks about somebody else to you, like, hey, get both together in a room, and then make sure that they resolve the differences. The next one is eliminate the crutches. And what that means basically is, like, that was a lesson that I learned recently. Uh, what happens is that most of the times, if you are asked why you could not get something done, 99% of the times you have an excuse. Right, 99% of the times you have, no, I couldn't get this done just because, like, my friend called me and I could slip in, and then because of that, like, I couldn't wake up earlier, and that what's happened. Like, if you ask employees, if you ask people in your team, most of the times the reason why they could not get something done was never like is never themselves. It's just something else that happened. And that happens often with teams and companies. Like usually there's something that people complain a lot about all the time. And as leaders, your role is actually to eliminate that thing. Because once you eliminate that, your team has no excuses, and they will have to execute, or they will have to forget about that thing and then just like figure out something else, figure out a better way of doing things. The example I can give you at Flieber was that we when I joined, uh, um, because I started advising and I helped to found the company, but I joined a little later as a full-time CTO. Um, there was this like old system that everybody was complaining about, but we already had customers using it. So we had customers using that. Engineers were complaining about and saying that they could not get things done faster just because the system was there, and like it was really hard to maintain, really hard to expand that thing. So at some point, I just said, you know what, like that's enough. Let's queue that thing and build that from scratch. So we literally like sent messages to our customers saying, hey, I'm sorry, you're gonna be without the system for a month and a half most likely, and we're gonna do everything manually. So we had like 6 people generating spreadsheets, making calculations by hand, like, and sending to our customers while we were with the engineering team rebuilding the whole thing from scratch. That was very, very painful, but that was the only way for us, to remove that thing that was like, we were just, uh, um, uh, on top of that thing, say, hey, this is the reason why. This is the reason why. Eliminate the reason. There's no reason why, right? Like you have to get things done. That was painful, but we did that eventually early this year, and that was the best thing that we have done ever. And I will tell you what, we are about to do the same thing again. So that's just like how I really, really believe in that thing. And lastly, embrace diversity. So I like the way that you put that, Thomas, because a lot of people think that diversity is just like ethnic things or gender. I think about diversity as like these different backgrounds that just bring different thoughts to your company. Um, so at Flieber, for example, we have engineers in Brazil, in Argentina, we have engineers in Amsterdam, we have people in here in the United States, um, Italy, and they are all remote. And it's really interesting how this different background brings a lot of innovation. And what I the other thing is the background is not just like country wise, right? Like, yes, in this case, we brought a lot of people from different countries, but think about also different industries. So Flieber has to do, does a lot of things regarding supply chain and online retailing. Zero engineers have come from that industry. No engineers at all. Not even the product manager that we hired came from that industry. And the reason why is just because we want people that had like completely different mindset, totally different mindset than the industry has. It has been really really good because what happens is that we have the CEO that used to be a seller at Amazon. We have myself that has some logistics background, and then we have those people all the time asking us why we have to do things in that way. And then the answer often is, well, because it's the way that the market does. And then the question comes back saying, but why? Like, why should we follow that? Like, this is just, it's inefficient, right? Let's just do things in this way. Like, this is a lot more efficient. And that's how innovation happens. It's when you have people that are from different backgrounds, different industry, just like disrupting things and making sure that those things that was, before done in a particular way, now it's done in a much better way, in much more efficient way. So for culture, those are the 7 things that I had in mind. I want to do a quick break here and then see if anyone has any questions around culture and you know want me to go in details about any example that I have given here.
There's a question of asking how do you keep how do you make sure that culture like people are aligned with the same culture when the team is like remote or are away of each other?
Yeah. Like now we have a full remote team at Flieber, and I built the Brazilian branch for Carta, um, having like around 52 employees at the time, and the headquarters was here in the United States, actually there in the Silicon Valley. There's We have tried a lot of things. Um, we have tried moving people, like sending people across offices all the time. So at Carta, we'd have people like constantly every 2 weeks. We'd have people from the United States in Brazil and people from Brazil in the United States, just to kind of like foster this communication and make sure that people are exchanging knowledge and culture. But I think literally what actually works the most is are 2 things. Number one is constant communication, like over communicate. If you have a team that works remotely, you gotta make the extra effort on communication. So it's not just about like having things in whatever task management system you use or send notes. It's actually like having things on task management, send notes, send email, and possibly like even calling the person, say, hey, did you get my memo? Like, it's something about that, right? Like, it's actually embracing that you need to communicate a lot more than the regular companies, just because you have now people abroad. Um, and the second thing is, don't give up on your values. So a good example about this is that Carta have a meeting called Show and Tell, which is a really nice meeting. It happens I think now it happens once a week. And the initial idea in the early days for that meeting was for everybody, that anyone in the company could just raise problems, issues, and they'd have the entire company to help them. They could also like just show whatever work they were working on, and things that they were really excited about, or show some tip ideas that other people could follow. But that meeting, it was a CEO show. Like it's him actually going over each one of the topics, talk to employees, and then at some point, the United States had a holiday, and the Brazilian office was about to like not have the meeting. They said no, like we're gonna make the meeting. Like I'm gonna run the show, but we're gonna have the meeting. Like it's culture, like it's the relentless desire to keep things going no matter what. And that was what we did. Like when things were like we had holidays, we had things like that were a little different. We keep things going as usual, and that is what makes people think, all right, there is a culture here. Like this is what we do. This is who we are, and that's why we do those things. We just need to constantly repeat, no matter what, and no matter who is the owner of process and such. So just follow that.
Awesome. There's another question asking, so the student used to work with his friends and colleagues from his own social group, and he's a little bit afraid to reach out to others. So what advice do you have to try to find the people that are outside of your social circle, but with the same culture and core value?
Yeah, that's a really good one. There are two main things I really advise you to do. Like the number one is figure out what can you offer first, right? So figure out what you can offer before you ask. So before you take, right? Like, so if you wanna get closer to those people, reach out to them, and then like learn something from them. Like figure out where can you help, right? How can you help them? How can you teach them, or how can you somehow add value to them first, and then certainly like getting closer to them would be a lot easier. And secondly, find things that are in common, right? Like things that you like, that they like, that it could be a topic, a subject of some conversation, and then just like make it happen. I have a good example about that too. I was there is a CTO, the CTO of Jive, by the way, Thomas. Maybe you can bring him in. He's a really nice guy. His name is Sam, and Sam reached out to me because he wanted to understand a little bit more about how I opened the office in Brazil, because he was thinking about having a team abroad and etc. And the way that I never forget, like the way that he reached out to me was like through a common friend, and that friend said, like you both like Django a lot. Django is the framework for Python. You both like Django a lot. I think you both should talk about Django. And that was the common thing that he found that I liked and he likes, and that became the topic of a cafe that we took together. And at the end of the cafe, he started to ask me questions about like how I opened the office and etc. Like even we became friends. Now we are friends. But it's really interesting how that had that works. If you find those things that are common, that's also helpful. So basically, like those two ways are often very successful.
Awesome. That was all the questions for now.
All right, so let's move forward. I will talk about team building now. I also have like 7 items for team building that I've learned along the way. So the the challenge with team building is, I'm a tech guy, like my I have a technical background, and I always say that the problem with hiring is people. Like, and it's the problem with management. It's also people, and then literally the funny thing about this is that people is also the solution, right? Like, so we are part of the problem and part of the solution at the same time. And if you bring someone in that's really good technically, excuse me, but it's not very much aligned with the way that your team operates, um, the only reason why you'd bring someone like that in is because you want to disrupt the way that you are operating, right? So, like, just take a quick note about culture and team building. The only way for you to change, there are only two ways for you to change a culture of a company. Number one is hiring people with the new mindset that you want, but hiring them at a level that is bigger than the people that we already have. So either you hire more people than what you have, or people that have a lot influence, and they can bring in another, a fresh air, a new culture. Or you have to let the other people go and then bring new people to the company. So either way, you have to hire, and that's actually my point. It's really it's really hard to to change culture without having hiring in the equation. Um, so when you think about hiring, I always optimize for the culture that I want for my teams. So if I have a culture that is working really well, I would never hire someone that's really good, like A+ player, but has not a good fit. But if the culture is not going well, I would hire someone that's completely opposite to my team, just to create the shock and see what happens, and then make sure that this diversity now creates something new. It's not even the culture that I had or the new culture that this person is bringing in. It's something better. Like, it's something that's a mix of both. And of course, like, coach along the way. Um, so when you are hiring or bringing people in to create a successful team, think about what kind of uh, 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 operation or behavior you have now, and what you want to change, if you want to change, or what you want to continue doing. Then bring people that are aligned with that. So that's the first thing about, like, team building, of course. The second thing is, A players like A players. I think that's obvious. But let me tell you a story. I had an engineer that he considered himself as an A player. Let's put it that way. Um, and he was always, like, all the time, complaining about the other engineers that he had to work with, and then saying that those engineers are not good. Like, we need to hire senior engineers. They are not senior engineers, and blah blah blah, and all this kind of things. I said, okay, man, what do you me, what do you have me to do? So, I just let them go and find new people. I said, okay, so let's do differently then. Help me to find the people that are at your level, and let's make the difference together. And it took a year and a half, and we didn't hire anyone. And I, I came back to him and said, why is that? Oh, we didn't find anyone that's good enough. Oh, really? Like, the problem is that his perception of on the other people was that they whatever mistake that they made, they would be not worthy to work with him. And I said, like, you have a lot of mistakes. You are an A player. I understand that, but you gotta also see how the other people are contributing. And the lesson that I learned from that is that it's not just about having A players in your team, but it's also about like creating this sense of trust that everybody, like it doesn't matter whether you like the way that that person actually works or not. All it matters is that can you trust that this person will get the job done at the level that the whole team is satisfied with. Um, the problem though is when you bring someone that it's not aligned with that, right? Like when you bring someone that is that lacks some particular knowledge that will break this chain of trust among the team. The other example I have is that at some point I had a team that had a front end engineer that was really, really, really junior, while the entire team was senior. And we had like actually 2 junior front end engineers and 3 senior engineers on the back end. So the back end would get everything completed really fast and in a really good fashion, but the front end would actually always delay the projects, and that just creates friction, all the time. So eventually, like what I had to do was actually to move those two junior engineers to other teams where they'd have like more senior people to coach them, and hire senior engineers that would be at the same level at least of that team. So that is my point here. Like, yes, A players like to play with A players, so be aware of that. But at the same time, if you build the trust, no one will actually even realize whether they are A players or not. As long as you are getting results, as long as you are getting things done, I think that should be fine. And the third topic is trust is a blessing, protect it at all costs. Like there's nothing else better than having a team that trusts each other. And one of the things that I say a lot is people that go through the mud together, they tend to create bonds, right? Like they tend to create better relationships. And they tend to respect each other. And that actually, if you see how Army does that, like how people, if you talk about people that have been, have been deployed or have gone through like some really, really dangerous things, they talk to each other, they talk about each other as brothers and sisters and not as friends. Like they talked about each other as part of, like they are part of each other just because they had to protect each other's back. That is trust. And when you have trust in your company, and when you have trust in your teams, like things are going to get done a lot better and faster than you can ever imagine. The challenge though, and here's the advice, trust very often also leads to hiding things, right? Like when you have like an underperformer or people that are not performing really well, just because people love that person, their whole team tends to protect that person, and sometimes that becomes really hard for you to see. So building trust between the team is important, but also building trust between you and your team is very, very important to open this line of communication and making sure that they can come to you and talk about, what really is happening. It's also important. So it's all about how do you trust your team, how your team trusts you, and how they trust each other. At Carta, we have done important things to foster trust. One of them is that you'd have pair programming. I don't know if you are familiarized with the pair programming methodology, which is basically an agile methodology where you have 2 developers. One is driving, while the other one is just like watching and kind of like co-piloting the process. So while the one that is driving is like talking and letting the partner know about their thoughts and why they are doing things in a particular way, while the partner is just saying, oh, maybe we could do this in another way. And after, I think every 2 hours they switch, and then the other one becomes the driver, and then the one that was driving becomes the co-pilot. And the interesting thing about this is that you learn a lot about someone just watching them working, and how they do things. And then you start to trust a lot, because when you work, like for engineers, I don't know how many of you actually have engineering in your life, but when you are building something, like, and then you're building your code, you're typing and doing things, very often you find yourself like thinking that the others don't know what you know, or the others don't know how to do things in the way that you do. Uh, and then when you pair program with other people, and then you see them working, very often actually you learn something, and then you realize that you don't know everything, and that just creates trust, right? And that was the most effective thing I've learned in my career for team building. That was the most effective thing, like just getting those two people working together on something. It's very, very powerful. The fourth one for team building is hold people accountable. Um, and holding people accountable doesn't mean like making shame of people like publicly, right? Like just making people feel uncomfortable publicly. That's not hold someone accountable. What holding people accountable means is that you will uh, um, you will be on top of things when things are not functioning, right? Like when you have committed to something and you are not able to deliver that, you will search the whys behind that, and you will find a way, like you find out that that could be either a lack of knowledge, or somebody that just like didn't tell you um, um, about their personal problems, or people that have told you that they knew something that they didn't and they had to learn. So hold accountable means that you will investigate, like you will research, you will figure out why that thing happened, and you will find out. And often it's just like silly things that you can solve pretty fast, change the way that people work. But there are some times that you just figured out that the person is a very underperformer, and you have to coach them, either coach them or figure out a better role for them. So hold people accountable actually to me means that you care about the work that your team is producing, and you care about what that person is capable of doing. And like I said before, the other one is like, let your team struggle together. Like, man, there's nothing, like, it's very powerful when you when you have an issue. Like today, I am the CTO, I can see all the channels in Slack, and sometimes I get into the war room channel, which is like when something is on fire, like everybody just go to that channel to talk and figure out a solution. Sometimes I know the solution, but I just like watch them going through the mud together, just because that creates bonds, right? Like they figured out things together and they learn together. And when team learns together, they are a lot stronger together as well. I will run through the other two. Like the sixth one is like making hiring a collective decision. So this is a Google example. At Google, you will never see a hire being done by the hiring manager alone, or by whoever, like the HR alone or something like that. Hiring at Google is a committee that decides on top of based on all the comments that the interviewers did along the process. They don't know names, they don't know gender, they don't know age, they don't know anything. They only see like a number and the profile. That's all they see, and they make their decision collectively, right? Like they read the profiles, they read the comments, they discuss about that, and collectively they decide whether that person should be hired or not. Also, as a manager at Google, you don't get to hire your employees. What you do is actually you help hiring people, and then the committee decides which team that person actually fits better. Um, so those are interesting topics about like how to build teams. And what I like about this example for about Google is that you eliminate completely bias. You don't get like a manager hiring people that they're gonna protect. It's very likely that you're gonna have people that are actually a good fit for your team and will function well with your team. More people thinking about the process is much better than just one. And lastly, like just celebrate success. Um, a good example, and it's actually a funny story at Carter. I was director of engineering, and I had a budget, a monthly budget that I could spend um, having like drinks and things like that with the engineers. So I didn't spend that for a quarter, and I told my team that if we reach all the goals, we would go to a steakhouse. I don't know. Are you guys from the Bay Area or not? Like Thomas, are you from San Francisco or something like that? Yeah. So there is a steakhouse in Palo Alto called Flamingos, and that's a very expensive steakhouse. I had a team of 7 people. So after 3 months, we actually reached the deadlines. So I took them in. That was like a 2005, I think 2,500 kind of like check at the end of the night. But we actually celebrated, in a really good way. On Monday, of course, like I got a call, I got called by the CTO, say that I spent too much. But like that was a really good way of celebrating things. And what I noticed after that was that people asked to go, have drinks uh, every once in a while, like every 15 days or every 20 days. And what surprised me was that on those happy hours, people were like talking about their lives, like they were sharing a lot of stories about their previous work, their families, and they were getting stronger together and creating stronger relationships. And that was one of the things that made me really, really proud of. So um, I think, Thomas, those are the topics that I had for team building and culture. Do you have any questions up there?
Yeah. Can you give us an example of you firing people, if
Yeah.
any?
But you want an example of firing people because of culture? That's what you mean?
It's kind of vague, but I guess any type of example. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have few examples. You know, Firing people is not the thing that you like the most to do. It's very I mean, it's very annoying for any reasons. Like for many reasons. It's sad because you are letting someone that has family sometimes, like uh, letting that person go, or somebody that was into the company. They wanted to do something, but they were just not a good fit. That's really, really hard. And also, like, it really depends from case to case. But this in particular happened in Brazil. Um, so at the time, Carta was a company where the work hours, at least to start, was very like it was part of the culture. In Silicon Valley, we would open at 8:30, and everybody would show up 8:30. Have the first meeting 8:30 a.m. And we lost a lot of good engineering candidates during the hiring process just because of that rule. Um, so in Brazil, we started a little later because of the time zone difference. So we would start at 10:30 a.m. So this engineer was like consistently getting like 12 p.m. In the office or 11:30 in the office. He would miss all the morning meetings with the team, and that was like, really, really. I was really upset about that. So I started to talk to him and coach him. But that was just the first thing. What actually really made me to make a decision on firing him was that he would never he would let his team down most of the times. And the way that he would do that is we would have a deadline that was committed by the whole team. He would have a piece of engineering that you'd have to deliver. And then he decided to refactor another piece of engineering without talking to anybody. So he would not deliver what he had to do. And he also would not finish the refactoring. So he kept doing that consistently because he was so upset about the code. He was a good engineer. He was so upset about the code that he couldn't help him. So I coached him for 3 months, like telling him, hey, what if you use your Fridays? I can give you the Fridays for you to refactor the code. So use your Fridays, refactor the code on Fridays, but from Monday to Thursday, do your job. Like just get things done. It didn't work. So I also asked him, hey, can you pair program with this other engineer? And maybe my hope was that he could learn a different way of doing things. It didn't help. It didn't work. So suddenly at the 3rd month, I told him, hey, look, I have given you all this feedback. I haven't shown you like all those things that you could do to improve yourself, but you haven't done it. And like I have no choice. Like now it's just like hitting the progress of your team. That was what happened.
Awesome. And another question is a little bit repetitive, but how do you come up with a set of core values from scratch?
Yeah, from scratch. It really depends on the things that, like, it always starts with the things that the founders believe. Literally, like, culture is always a reflect of the founders. It's just a fact. So this culture of like showing up 8:30 a.m. every day, it's Henry. Like Henry wakes up like 5 a.m. or I think, and then he thinks that the first thing you have to do is just like have a meeting with your team and figure out things for the day. So it always starts with that. And then secondly, like once you have written down all the things that you believe that are true, try to figure out how to convert the things that you believe into things that can help your team to make decisions. Like I said before, right? So another example of that is that Harry at Carter, he's a funny guy. He comes from the engineering background, and he doesn't like much product managers. He thinks that product managers like don't have the right mindset. So he created this core value called data model first, just to please engineers, I guess. But the idea is like figure out the data model first. Once you have the data model, then you can build the product. So this is what he believes, right? And that is cool because when it comes down to making decision, like should we build a prototype and get in front of customers, like or should we just like figure out what are the entities, how they relate to each other, how the real world actually works, and then build this data model first, and then build the product on top of it. So the answer would be always like, all right, like, let's get the engineers in a room, let's explain them what we have to do and figure out what is the data model. So that's how it helped a lot.
Right. And Mini change the question. Can you, if possible, can you unmute yourself and ask because it's super long. I don't know if she's still here. Yeah, can you? Yeah, let me see if that works.
So I just had a question. about like team identity. You mentioned that trust was crucial to team building. So like once a team is like somewhat established, do you have any thoughts or tips on like building a team identity to further strengthen that kind of like team mindset?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. I guess the rule of thumb is that this has to be a bottom up thing. It cannot be top down, right? Like it cannot be something that you, as a manager or leader, you just like come in and say, hey, like here's our identity. Here's what we're gonna do. And also you have to define what identity means to you, right? Like to me, identity means what are the things that we believe technically, right? Like how we like to do things, how we like to work, how do we work, uh, define how the process within the team actually work. Um, a good example of that is that I had, at some point I was managing like 9 different teams, and um, like half of those teams were using Scrum in the regular basis, and the other half was using Kanban. Um, and like at some point my manager came to me and said, hey, like everybody should standardize for Scrum. I said, no, like how can you do that? Like this is part of how they work, and they are they are you know producing a lot, right? Like they are productive like that way. It's the way that they work, but they have chosen that way. What you can do though, you can coach, right? Like you can try to lead in the path of figuring out what they actually like, what they believe, and how they do things. And the way that I would do this is promoting the brainstorms and the conversations. At Flieber and at Carta, we have what we call offsites. We do that on a regular basis, where the offsites is not to talk about, things that didn't work. It's not to talk about clients. It's not to talk about the company. It's actually, hey, like, what are the things that we believe? How we wanted this to work, right? Like, if we, and I like to use that thing, that metaphor. Like, if you have no gravity and you had unlimited money, what would you do? Like, how would you change the way that you work? How do you change the way that you do things? Which kind of resource would you have, and such? So that's, and the reason why we say no gravity is just to say, hey, like, imagine that anything is possible, right? Like, anything is possible, and you have enough money to make it happen. What would you do? I think like provoking those conversations is actually what will eventually generate the identity.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Actually, I have another question as well. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier about like the team potentially covering up for a member. Yeah, that just sounded really interesting because that's not something I like ever really thought about. But like, have you ever personally experienced something like that, or do you have like a real life example you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Flieber, we look for engineers um, that can do like what we call full stack, right? Like they can work on the back end and the front end. And then at some point, we had this engineer that he was really good on the front end. We asked him to do some things in the back end, and we knew that uh, he would not be like a player in the back end because it's just like something that he was not familiarized with. And what happened was that I was looking for knowing whether he could learn that thing or not, like whether he could improve his skills or not. And what happened was that the team was actually like building things for him. And then he would just like show up with that thing done. But like that was not him. Or, if it was just like a tiny space. Like he didn't have to, go deep into that and learn. which I was expecting. Um, and the reason why I knew that was that because when I asked questions, like, why did you do things in that way? Like somebody else would answer, oh, like this way is actually the best way of doing this because blah, 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 blah. So like, why him is not answering that, right? It's kind of like a teacher in his school, like somebody actually do the work for the classmate. And then when the teacher like ask about that work, like they don't know how to explain. It's kind of the same thing. So that was how I found out that case.
And like, how did you like kind of handle or deal with it?
Yeah, that's pretty tough. Because if you think about that initially, what triggered the whole thing was me asking him to do something in the back end, right? Like, and then he tried to do like what I tried to understand was what drove him to basically lie, right? Like to instead of saying, "Hey, I'm not capable of doing that," or I need more time to learn, like asking somebody else to do things. Um, and it turned out that after a couple of one-on-ones, in that particular case, I figured that he was not having this kind of like psychological safety, you know, that it was okay for him to make mistakes. And because the team liked him so much, he would ask the team, hey, like, you know, just can you do this for me? But like, uh, uh, and then like, just I will look better. And at the end of the day, like it was all about psychological safety in that case. Um, so I tried to learn more, like why is that? Like why him is not having psychological safety? Like is that something? Is that the way that I am behaving in the meetings? Is that the way that the team is holding each other accountable, or why is that, right? And it's just like going really deep. Um, Eventually, what I learned from that case was that in the early days, that engineer was running really fast with things in the front end. Um, and then we told him, oh, you are super fast. Like, you are fantastic. Like, you can do things in just a day. Like, it's awesome. Like, I would just say, like, his nickname, like, Tony would do things amazing. Like, Tony can do things in just one day. That created a sense that he is the Tony one day. You know what I mean? Like, I am the Tony one day. I cannot do things in 2 days. I have to do things in one day. Or I am the Tony that do things fast. I cannot do things slow. And then later, I had to actually break this cycle because, like, he was just using the way that we were complimenting him in the early days as the standard that he cannot go below. And that was what created this like psychological unsafety for him, because he was saying that he was not producing at the same level he was producing before, but now he's also asked to do things that he was not doing before.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting, especially how you have the term like psychological safety and like kind of looked deep into it more. Yeah, I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. And there's another question of just as an entrepreneur, do you have any suggestions for people that are in college? How do they get started? How do they come up with ideas or make friends even?
Yeah. I mean, usually you start with things that you don't like today. That's literally how I start things. Like, what is it that bothers you the most in your life? And I bet that it also bothers other people too. Um, like, just figure that out. Like, as an entrepreneur, you are always looking for problems to solve, right? But very often they are actually around you and you not even notice, right? So my advice to you is like, stop for a second and try to think, what are the things that you hate that you have to do every single day, or that people do to you, or companies do to you, or whatever. Like, what are the things that you really, really don't like? And then go and solve that problem. That's as simple as this. If you if you are looking for solving problems with technology, then you'd have to look for a partner. If you're not from the technical background, you'd also have to look for a partner that can, help you with that idea. Um, my advice is explore feedback as much as you can. Don't be afraid of somebody, stealing your idea or something like that. Um, because like, if it's a real problem, it's not that easy for anybody to build it. If that was like that, the problem wouldn't exist in the first place. Um, so share your ideas and figure it out, like collect feedback, as many feedback as possible. I think that is what will help you on your journey. And just to give an idea, like before we start Flieber, we talked to 500 sellers that used to sell on Amazon, like 500. That was the number.
Awesome. And this question is for like that people without a technical background, how do they come up with the technology or come up with the app or stuff like that to solve the problem that they're looking for?
Yeah. Um, so there are lots of ways today. There are companies that are specialized on building MVPs. So if you have a good idea and you have some money that you can invest on that just to see how far it gets, you can find those companies. Usually they are outside of the United States, which is good because like you can take advantage of the uh, currency exchange. So you don't have to pay a lot of money to get some MVP. And also like don't try to make something fancy. And in the first place, all you're trying to do is to validate your hypothesis. Like it's not that you're trying to build the next Facebook or the next generation of Instagrams. It's just like you're trying to test whether that problem exists and somebody is willing to use a product to solve that problem. That's all about it. So that is one way. The other way is literally like just getting enrollment in one of those courses that will teach you like the very basics. And I can assure you that it's not that hard. You get a MVP. I have an example actually of that. A friend of mine, he's now the CEO of Year End. His name is Sean Keefe. And he was the accounting manager, I think he's accounting manager for Carta. And he asked me he took a boot camp for 4 months. He learned by himself. He asked me some advice. I helped him a lot. He also asked me to become a kind of like a junior engineer in one of my teams. I brought him in. He did that for about like a year. And he built his own MVP. And he got into UI Combinator. How cool is that, right? So it's literally like up to you. It's just trying. If you really believe in that, just try hard.
Awesome. Let's see. I think there was one more question. Let me look through it. Oh, it's asking what's the transition like going from offline to remote? Has the company been remote this whole time, or was it like a tough transition?
It is hard. No, we were not remote all the time. We had an office in some of those locations, and then we became remote after COVID. And even being remote after COVID, like I'm moving from, I think in December probably, like I moved from California to New York area just to be in an office closer to my partner, right? So it's like the leadership, it's kind of like crucial to be together. So it is tough. I think the biggest challenge is domain expertise. What we do is really complex, and it's a very specific industry. And you not just have to manage your team on building products and all these kind of things, but also have to transfer knowledge, right? Like domain knowledge. And I think that has been the biggest challenge for us, finding people that either have done similar things before or have worked integrated with some of those systems is really, really hard. So we have to spend a lot of time like explaining how, things like what a lead time is, where is a warehouse, why sellers put a warehouse between, fulfillment centers, what is a fulfillment center, and things like that. So I think that's where things are hard. Besides of that, it's not that hard. Especially for tech companies, a lot of the engineers, they are kind of used to work from home, because they either had a, um, side projects that they would work at night, so they would have like a quiet room or something like that already. There are some gamers that have their own room for playing games, um, so it's not that hard. I think you know if you have, I think the biggest thing is like how to establish the culture that you want, and transferring knowledge. I think that has been the challenge.
And just to elaborate on that, are you guys gonna stay remote even after COVID or not?
Yeah. Well, personally, I don't like remote. Um, I think there's something special about being in the same room, writing things on the whiteboard, like pointing things on the screen of each other and then say, hey, like, this is the way of we should do this and etc. I think there's something special about it. With that being said, I don't think that the world will ever be like it was before. So what I think that will happen with us is that we're gonna have what I'm calling like flash moments, which are like basically moments where we have to get everybody in the same room together, like bring people from Brazil, Argentina, travel everybody, just to get something that's really, really big done, or to get some kind of strategy done, like some ideas rolled out and etc. So I think those flash moments will happen a lot. Um, but I don't believe that we will have like a really big office with like hundreds of people in it. Um, I think the world will be a lot different, and a lot of the great talents they will not like that. At least for the next, I'd say the next 5 years, or so.
Awesome. I guess one last question I got here is what's your uh what's your opinion in working at a big firm like Google and Facebook after graduation, compared to start your own company or join like a small team?
Yeah. I'm an entrepreneur, so that question is quite obvious for me, right? Like, don't go to Google or Facebook. Like, join an early stage company, build your own company, try new things. Like, here's the thing. Like, if you ask me what is the thing that I regret the most, is not have tried things earlier, right? Like, not when I was very, very young. Because it's when you have time to test and fail and learn from those failures, right? Like, it's when you're gonna do things, you're gonna make things wrong, and if you make things right at the first time, fantastic. Like, the results, the outcome are greater than you can ever expect. But the reality is that you will not learn as much in working for Google as you'd learn like working for us at Flieber, for example. Like, if you come and work for Flieber, I can tell you one thing: you're gonna touch AWS, and like all the cloud, all the different databases in the first day, and then you have to assemble that, because I don't have infrastructure engineers to do it. Like, you're gonna have to learn how to build that. But if you work for Google, everything is just there. All you have to do is just like hit a button, and then you have the repository for you. If you hit another button, there's a service already done for you that you all have to do is deploy your code. Like, come on, You know, if you are accounting for accounting or businessman, like if you join Google now, like sorry, like Google will not let you to run a team. You know, and I can tell you that at Carta, I had someone that was fresh graduate, like after 1 year working as an engineer, he was like running a team, managing a team of 6 engineers, and he was like, Jair, I don't know what to do. Like, dude, let's figure it out together. But like, you know, that was the best thing that ever happened to him. Of course, he made a lot of mistakes, but after that, he grew so much faster than everybody that just joined Google, that I think he's way more prepared now. And the other thing is, like, you have time in your life to do those those experiments. And if you don't like it, you still can join Google. You still can join Facebook. Like, you're young enough to do that.
Great, awesome. That was all the questions I got here. Thank you so much for joining us. It was very insightful. And with that, this will be the end of today's class.
Great. Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right. Bye.
Awesome.